This episode includes discussion of sexual violence and trafficking. Listener discretion is advised.
But there is one scene where it is a rape scene in a border area. It was given to me by a trafficker's agent on a pen drive, and it actually shows a girl on a rock, and her skirt hoisted up to her waist. It shows a man actually raping her, and then it shows another man using a camera trying to get the best angle to show the penetration, and then out out of the point of view there is another person who is actually filming all of this, and all three of them bantering. Now I pixelated it, but I did put it into the film, because at the end of it the girl gets up, pushes down her skirt, and walks away. Absolutely no fight left in her. That is what we are talking about. The fact that these kind of grotesque sexual violence and other forms of violence and abuses have happened one too many times, that and they have absolutely no one to turn to, no protection mechanism, and they have absolutely no fight in them, because it's just happening too often that maybe it has even become so normalized.
Genocide is a new word combining the Greek word genos meaning race or group, with the root of the Latin sidere meaning to kill.
Became interested in genocide because it happened so many times.
Power is all against one. Violence is the opposite. The extreme is one against all.
This is Not to Forgive, but to Understand, a podcast series discussing genocide studies with experts and those connected to its critical questions. I am Luis Gonzalez Aponte, co-host with Saba Karim.
And what we're about is really to try to understand why evil happens, why there are perpetrations in genocidal scenarios and scenarios of mass atrocity. Not to forgive, but to understand.
Forgive, but to understand.
Not to forgive, but to understand.
The plight of the Rohingya remains under-addressed in public discourse, even as the genocide case brought by the Gambia against Myanmar continues before the International Court of Justice, with merits hearings held in January 2026 and judgment still pending. Today we are joined by Mahi Ramakrishnan, an investigative journalist, filmmaker, and founder of Beyond Borders Malaysia, whose work focuses on refugees, human rights, and the Rohingya community in Malaysia. In this conversation, we discuss the condition of refugees in Malaysia, the political and legal barriers they face, and Mahi's use of film, advocacy, and the Festival on Wheels to build public understanding and community connection.
Mahi, it's a real pleasure to have you on board today and to speak to you about the plight of the Rohingya refugees, especially because while I was in Malaysia for 15 years, I had the experience in the early stages, this is before COVID, just before COVID, of seeing Rohingya refugees in Kuala Lumpur, in KL. More specifically, I would see them very often in Bukit Bintang. They were young girls, probably between the ages of 4 to 10, or probably a bit older as well. And they would actually be crossing the road, coming up to us when we were in the traffic, and they would basically try to sell the flower. And so they were risking themselves, they were risking their lives to sell these trinkets to us. And it was very clear that there was something happening out there. And we want you to tell us more about that, and also about the great projects that you have launched in Malaysia to help these refugees integrate in Malaysian society. I also want to touch on the recent news I read, which was not very pleasant to hear, about how these refugees were discriminated and treated and compared to other refugees within the country, how that leaked out, and how civil society is responding to that. So my first question to you is, what inspired you to begin working with refugees in Malaysia, and how did that lead to the founding of Beyond Borders Malaysia?
I find this the toughest question usually, like what inspired me. Okay, so I started off as an investigative journalist, right? And then I was working for quite a few media organizations, from Time Magazine to BBC to CNN to you name it. And one of those media organizations gave me a brief about the exodus of the Rohingya into Malaysia. And they wanted me to do a series of 2.5 to 3 minute news reports, which I did. And then I realized that, oh, you are always told as a journalist that you need to disassociate yourself, that there needs to be a space between you and whatever story it is that you are pursuing, that you cannot be emotionally attached. But that's easier said than done. So I kind of got attached to the Rohingya because it's the first time I'm actually seeing, how it feels like, or what it entails to actually be a refugee with absolutely no rights, having to flee a home, trying to make a new home in another place only to know that you are unwelcomed, right? So I decided that, okay, more than the news reports, I may actually have a platform in which I can ensure that their voices are heard or continuously heard. And so I started making documentary films. I wanted people to understand how dizzyingly complex the political situation is in Myanmar. So I started off by making a film that's titled Seeds of Hatred, that actually explains the dizzyingly complex issues surrounding the Rohingya in Myanmar. And then I think it was just no going back. I started stopping work to be able to bring in a school into the community, to bring in a mobile clinic as a way of responding to their immediate needs. I tried everything that I could possibly do. Actually, I didn't know that I was actually setting myself up to doing this full time years down the line, right? But, I just started doing that. And I think what happened was that the community saw me as just not an extractive person, someone who comes in and interviews them and goes back and puts it out into a story and makes money for herself, but somebody who was actually vested in their welfare, in their rights, in their aspirations and their hopes, and also, their grief and their loss. So I think that is how it snowballed. And then, years down the line, I realized that it was incredibly difficult to get funding for a person. So Beyond Borders Malaysia was set up, even though, I hate accounts and having to look through finances. It's just not me. For me, it's like, give me the money, let me do the project. And I have got, creative ideas oozing out of my ears because I am essentially an artist first. I'm a journalist, I'm a filmmaker first before anything else. And then from the Rohingya community, I started working with the rest of the communities in Malaysia. So now I work with almost all the refugee communities in Malaysia. And while having conversations with them, while being invited into their homes, I realized that there were many artists amongst the refugee communities. There were filmmakers, photographers, poets, person who made theater. I'm sure you know Saleh Sepas. I'm not sure if you would have met him, but yeah, his Parastu theater. And people who spoke eloquently. And there were just too many people. I just thought that there were so many people with these artistic abilities. And I was thinking, why not use that as a way of connecting them with the Malaysian society? Because the fact is, and I feel really sad to say this, but we have become really xenophobic and racist over the last few years. And I don't see that dissipating. I see that increasing. I see hate speech. And so I thought, okay, why not do this? Because yes, I can write reports, which are like 75 pages, which even I won't read once it's been sent to the donor. So I thought, why not I do something that's much more lively, that will actually allow Malaysians to understand better. That's how the Refugee Festival was born 10 years ago, as a way of creating platforms between the refugee communities and the Malaysian society. And last year, what I did was I decided, okay, let's shapeshift the festival and allow it to actually travel. So from last year, the festival is actually traveling to 12 different locations within the Klang Valley as a way of connecting people in their local places. So, artistically, that's what I've been doing. And then, of course, when it comes to policy and collaborations and networking with different civil society organizations around the region, I have partnered with ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights and AJAR, Asia Justice and Rights, and APRON, which is a refugee coalition of refugee organizations, as a way of continuously talking about Rohingya and ASEAN, and also Malaysia and ASEAN, as a way of ensuring that we can critically look at Myanmar, or push ASEAN to critically look at Myanmar. And we kind of heightened that lobbying effort in the run up to the election, and especially when Malaysia was the chair, because we thought it is one of our best opportunities to do that, because Malaysia hosts more than 500,000 refugees here, and more than 200,000 are the Rohingya, and then you have the rest from Burma and the rest of the refugee population. So we tried really hard. It didn't really end well, because Malaysia did not really have the political will. The Malaysian Prime Minister speaks about the Palestinian issue on an international platform. I'm a huge Palestinian supporter, so that makes me incredibly proud. But that does not translate into rights for the Palestinians, let alone any other refugees in the country. So, we are, of course, continuously doing lobbying efforts. Over the last 2 years, I've focused on conflict-related sexual violence, working with the survivors, as a way of coming up with an early warning system, as a way of lobbying ASEAN to make CRSV a mandate, and also as a way of looking into the PDF and other ethnic armed organizations who are equally sexually violating, the women in Myanmar, despite the fact that they are supposed to be the protectors. So, we are trying really hard at this point in time to get some funding so that we can get this work done, and then we can try the lobbying efforts.
Thank you. You have given us a lot of material to excavate. So let's go through everything that you just said and break it all down. I have many questions, starting with, because we have had the chance, Luis and I have had the chance to speak to people who are directly involved in the genocide, who are dealing with, the ongoing trial right now. It's very rare for us to get the chance to speak to someone who's dealing with the refugees, with what's happening because of the genocide and the after effects. And that's why this interview is so crucial to us. Tell us more about these stories. So you're a multi-award winning filmmaker, and you mentioned that you produce these documentaries. Could you give us snippets, some of the stories that you have recounted in these documentaries?
About the genocide, the ongoing trial and the kind of response that you actually see in Malaysia, you see absolutely nothing. You see pockets of people talking about it. You may actually see panel discussions about it, but it doesn't seem to have that much effect on Malaysia and the Rohingya here. I'm sure the conversations are happening amongst and within the Rohingya community. But do you actually see the government responding to it? Do you see the way, like I said, Anwar responds to the Palestinian issue? You don't really see that happening. And I think that that's really sad, because I do know that, the Rohingya issue is one of the most pressing issues that we need to deal with. I mean, it's genocide unfolding. Of course, you can't quantify people's suffering, and I'm not going to draw parallels between what's happening in Myanmar and what's happening in Gaza. I'm just saying that, people are suffering, people are being murdered, people are being butchered by forces that are in power. The military has been doing this with impunity because they know that at the end of the day, ASEAN is a toothless tiger, that at the end of the day, diplomacy and trade matter more than human lives. And, if you take that equation back into Malaysia and you look at the social stratification of the refugees, you will understand that the Rohingya seem to occupy the lowest rung. I mean, there's so much hate against the Rohingya. And for the life of me, I can't quite figure out why, except to say it's racism and colorism. The Rohingya look like me. They are dark-skinned. They look like me in Malaysia. But I have been in Myanmar in 2013 at Rakhine State, filming in all the internally displaced people's camps. I was just lucky. I managed to get a fixer who, after 6 months of trying, got me a proper proper permission from the military to actually film. And there I saw Rohingya who are really light-skinned, who had green eyes and blue eyes and brown eyes. But that shouldn't matter. Your eye color and your skin color shouldn't matter. I mean, the other thing that I notice in Malaysia is that every time I sit on a panel, whether it's about the Palestinians, it's about refugees in total, or it's about the Rohingya, it's always about the religion at play. People identifying, the speaker identifying with that particular issue based on religion. Our brothers, our ummah. I'm saying that, yes, go ahead and do that. But let's just expand beyond that and look at it from a humanitarian point of view or from a human rights perspective. I'm a non-Muslim, but I've worked with the Rohingya for more than 2 decades. I think this mindset has to shift, that we need to look at issues because these are grotesque violations of human rights and humanitarian or international humanitarian law, for example. But we are stuck, and we are unable to do that in Malaysia, I must say.
So
So
I must interrupt you here, sorry, and just like ask you if you could give us a little bit of a summary of what the Malaysian environment is like for our audience, who is primarily international. And obviously, I've been there for a long time. I understand quite a lot about second-class citizenship and whatever we speak about over there. But I would love you to give us a bit of a background so that we understand why there is this positive discrimination towards Rohingyas because they are Muslims. But at the same time, that jeopardizes or that relegates other refugees if they are not Muslims. So there is negative discrimination against them.
see, the thing is, I don't think it's because of their religion. I really think that it's because of racism and colorism, and also because of the fact that the Rohingya have very little, or a large population of the Rohingya have very little to no education, simply because they were trying so hard to stay alive, right? To stay alive. This has been happening from the 70s. So, many of them have not even gone to school, let alone looked at a school. For example, absolutely no opportunity to have themselves educated. I'm sure you have seen other Rohingya who have been resettled into the US, for example, or on other parts of Europe. They have had an opportunity to actually get themselves educated. But going back to the Malaysian situation, we have not ratified the 1951 UN Refugee Convention. So the Malaysian government hides behind the fact that it has not ratified the convention to say that I do not need to recognize you. I don't recognize asylum seekers. So here it also questions the relationship that the Malaysian government has with the UNHCR, because the UNHCR card that the refugees hold, is not something that guarantees their safety. It all depends on the discretion of the particular police officer who's at a roadblock, whether he wants to say, okay, he wants to recognize your UN card, or he doesn't have to recognize your UN card. Now, going back, does Malaysia have obligations? Of course it does, because we have ratified very many other conventions and treaties, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW. We are a party to Sustainable Development Goals 2030. And, many people do not know this, but Malaysia has also ratified the New York Declaration, which in turn has ratified almost all other conventions in the world. And we are also bound by customary international law, particularly the non-refoulement principle, which says that you cannot send someone back to a place where there's a remote possibility of them facing abuse or being murdered, or facing persecution. Yeah. But we have pushed back Rohingya boats many times. So Malaysia is also in violation of that particular non-refoulement principle. And then if you take a step back and look at torture in itself, torture is a jus cogens norm. And because it's a jus cogens norm, it has achieved a jus cogens status. What happens is that, it is non-derogable. So Malaysia has not ratified the Convention Against Torture, but it is still bound by the fact that torture is a jus cogens norm and it is non-derogable. But torture in immigration detention, torture during police detention and arrest, is very common. It's public knowledge. Mm-hmm. And, the thing is that I go back to this over and over because I'm really frustrated with the Malaysian Prime Minister, not because he, raised his middle finger against Biden when he was the president, but because that does not translate into anything tangible for the refugees. And how long do we wait? Now, I'm not saying that today we need to start the ratification process and tomorrow we'll ratify it. It's going to take more than 10 years to ratify it because you need to sign on the dotted lines, you need to align it with domestic laws, and we do not have the kind of time. I'm talking about the refugees not having that kind of time. But we do have existing legal framework like the IMM 13 under the Immigration Act, which the Home Minister just needs to sign. And that will allow refugees the right to work. And I know that the government will always talk about security, national security concerns. Fair enough. I'm not going to go there. But what I'm saying is, if the UNHCR has given them cards, they have gone through a rigorous process and finally admitted as refugees, then at least allow them the right to work so that they can take care of themselves. If I give you my phone to hold for a day, Sabah, I think you will just go berserk, because the number of calls, the number of text messages I get asking for medical help, asking for all kinds of intervention, people being arrested even though they have refugee cards, mothers who need delivery and there's absolutely no money, people with cancer, people who have lost an arm and a leg. It's just too many. And essentially 90% of these messages come from the Rohingya. How much can a person or a civil society organization do? How much can a coalition of NGOs do without political will?
You mentioned that you're working with many different refugees in Malaysia. Rohingyas are the Rohingyas, or some of them. Tell us about these other communities. Because of Malaysia's geographical location, it's attracting refugees from certain parts of the world. Tell us about them. Tell us how you basically connect the plight of these refugees together and how distinct they are from one another, these different groups.
The suffering is the same. The fact that they come here and they're absolutely stranded. Mm-hmm. For the Rohingya, they come here because, largely in the 70s and 80s, it's seen as a Muslim country. So, they will identify with our plight. Let's go there. Now, for the refugees, it's like a lot of our family members are already there. So let's go there. And it's really the closest proximity. And then they have to sit here and try and get themselves resettled, which is going to be another nightmare, especially with accepting countries, not really wanting to take in refugees at this point in time. So we have got refugees from Guinea, Ghana, Sierra Leone, from Sudan, from Somalia, from Sri Lanka, from, all the refugee communities in Myanmar. So, and Pakistan as well. So the thing is that, all of them are equally stranded in Malaysia, given the fact that, there is no right to work, and there is no access to structured education, and there is no access to affordable healthcare. The operating word here is affordable. Can they get themselves into a hospital? Yes. But can they pay a 5,000 ringgit fee? For a pregnant mother, for example, you need to pay 2,500 ringgit, which is what? 5,000, no, more than that, about 7,000 US dollars, $7,000 to $8,000 in order to get themselves admitted into the hospital in the first place. So it is really difficult for them. And for some reason, I must say that the other communities from Myanmar are better organized than the Rohingya community. I have no idea why. And then, if you really take a step back and look at the other communities from different parts of the world, they are also much better organized than the Rohingya community. And I must say that the level of patriarchy and toxic masculinity amongst the refugees is incredibly high. So if you have watched my film called Bo, which means bride, in the Rohingyan language, I actually started making the film because, I do quite a bit of work on trafficking, and traffickers are always featured in all my documentaries. So that's why my documentary kind of stands apart a tiny bit, even though there are so many filmmakers who are doing incredible work, right? So what happens here is that I was researching, and I realized that, oh my God, they are not just trafficking. They're actually being asked to traffic girls from different parts of Myanmar, from Rakhine state, because the Rohingya men have been having those conversations with the traffickers. So they go there and they say, listen, I want a bride from Mongdo, for example, a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old girl as a bride. And, I can't pay you the 8,000 Malaysian ringgit, which is what? About maybe slightly less than 2,000 US dollars. But we can do this as a monthly payment, right? So I was actually shocked when that happened. And I asked the Rohingya men, and I said, what about the Rohingya women who are already in this country? Why can't you just get married here? And they were like, oh, because they've been exposed to a different culture and they will not be, quote unquote, obedient. So you see, that is what that sets them apart from the rest of the community, which is a little bit more accommodating, which is a bit, which is I can say, which is a lot more progressive when it comes to centering women as advocates or centering women as spokespeople or talking about their rights or getting them to lead projects. For example, here you get death threats. I mean, Sharifa Shakira, who was a very prominent refugee leader, woman leader, Rohingya woman leader, had so many death threats because she was speaking up, right? And now if you look at the Facebook page of Yasmin Ullah, for example, there's so much of trolling that's going on, saying that they are worthless, calling them prostitutes, for example. So I think this is something that sets the Rohingya apart from the rest of the refugee communities in Malaysia. And I must say that one, you can either take a step back and say, I don't want to have anything to do with this is just too much, and get angry, or you can say that I really need to work with them, and I really need to look at where this toxic masculinity is coming from and see what I can do in terms of educating the community.
So here is a question. What can we do? What can you do? How do you start that process of re-education? I mean, what you're saying is very close to my heart. I'm also a feminist writer. So I'm just wondering, when you have to deal with not just the refugee condition of these people, but you have to add toxic masculinity to the way in which they're organized, or the way that the forces that govern the way they connect with each other. How do you deal with all of this at once?
For me, I think this is what I do. I'm not saying that it's 100% successful, and I welcome any recommendations and suggestions from you both. But the thing is that I go to the community leader. That's all I do. I go to, because different communities have different community leaders, I go to the community leader with a friend of mine from the Rohingya community, a male from a friend of mine from the Rohingya community who has known me for X number of years, who actually knows my work and that I mean well. And then we slow talk and we have this conversation, because it's only a respected figure within the community, a scholar or an imam, or someone who is respected, an elderly person who is able to go and then talk to the rest of the community. So this is what we are slowly trying to do as well. A simple thing like, come and get yourself educated. Come and let me talk to you about your rights. It's just a one-day thing. Unless I tell them that when you come and you sit through the 8 hours and then you leave, you will be given groceries. So the women will use that as an excuse to get permission from their husbands. It's not just the husbands, it's the uncle, it's the son, it's the brother. It's just never ending, right? I mean, I have gone and to see women who have just given birth running a fever, and when I hug them, I know that they're running a fever and they're just so absolutely tired because they have got 2 or 3 more toddlers running around. And when I try talking to the husband about spacing birth, he will end the conversation like this. Allah gives, so who am I to say no to it? So I can't say, hey, bro, there are very many other contraceptive methods, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't say that.
So I do know about when I was in Malaysia, I remember we were facing the similar issues, but with Syrian refugees. And I know there was, my friends were talking about how Malay men were marrying very young Syrian girls. And the stories were quite terrible to hear. So is the same thing happening in Malaysia with these Rohingya girls, these girls who could come as refugees? Because I do know for a fact that, I mean, earlier you talked about Rohingya men and how they're trying to get to women who are in Myanmar. What about Malay men or Malaysian men in general who need to have a partner and therefore probably are exploiting the pool of women who are coming in to Malaysia?
Well, they definitely won't go for the Rohingya women. Like I told you, there's just so much hate against the Rohingya girls. And the Rohingya girls are like 13 and 14. But, if you look at what's happening in Malaysia, we do have a special court that looks at sexual violences against women, against girls, right? But on the other side, if a scholar or an imam or someone elderly in that particular Malay Muslim community actually endorses a marriage, then a 16-year-old child or a 15-year-old child can still be married off, despite the fact that the legal age is 16 for the Muslims, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, how do you have a special court that looks at sexual violences, rape, and other sexual violences against women and girls, and allow a girl to be raped under the guise of marriage because she's still a child? But the thing is that I'm not going to talk more about this because issues that race, royalty, and religion are extremely sensitive issues in Malaysia. So, as a non Muslim, even if I want to talk about it in a respectful fashion, as a way of engaging different scholars to kind of brainstorm and think through some of the crucial issues, that will land me in a lot of trouble. Because Islam is the official religion. So, I can be construed as being an enemy of Islam, which means I'm an enemy of the state, which means I'm a traitor. So I won't even go there. But what I can safely say is that child marriage is happening, whether in the Malaysian context or in the Rohingya context. I have not come across the other communities who are marrying off their children that young. But because I was from last year, I was kind of trying to do as many interviews as possible with the survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. So I got to know a few stories in Malaysia told to me in confidence about how some of the Rohingya women, mothers in Myanmar, are forced to sell their daughters to the military. Like, for example, if there are 8 in the family, and they need to leave, they need to flee, and that needs to be done in a safe environment, right? So for them it's like, okay, I just sell you this daughter so that the rest of us can actually flee safely.
When
So
we're
it's
talking about the military, we mean the military there.
in Myanmar, yeah,
In
the
Myanmar,
Myanmar military, yeah. So, and also if you look at traffickers, right, I'm not talking about the high level traffickers. I'm not talking about the power brokers, right? We all know who they are. But I'm talking about those who are ordinary traffickers who will inform the Rohingya, the men, that there are women available being held in the trafficking camps. The trafficking camps are not quite there anymore, and also we have not seen an influx. But when it was happening before the coup, this was quite common. So they live interspersed amongst the Rohingya community as well. So the Rohingya actually know who the traffickers' agents are, for lack of another word. I think also because it's corruption. I mean, if a child is sold off for 8,000 ringgit, which is about almost $2,000, that's a lot of money. And also, when I was working on the film Bo, I also came across. I did an interview with a trafficker who told me about how his colleagues in Myanmar, in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar, will actually get like 10 girls together, fake their passports, and then fly them into the country. And they go through the Malaysia's immigration, I think, because there's already like a pre-arranged agreement between the immigration or which immigration officer, because I think they are able to identify which immigration officers, and then these kids are brought into Malaysia and sold off for 16,000 Malaysian ringgit. No more 88, but 16,000. So I understood that they were being channeled to the child sex industry, whether in Malaysia or border areas. But I must say that I did not have the mental capacity or the finances to kind of pursue that lead as well. I wanted to keep the story much more focused, and that's how it was done. But I must say that 6 or 12 weeks later, more than 100 immigration officers were transferred out of Kuala Lumpur International Airport.
So that basically definitely panned out into something very productive for the whole.
But also because this is a lucrative industry, whether it's migrant workers or refugees, they are seen as bodies. You look at them and you see dollar signs. You don't see anything else, right?
Yeah,
So as long as people are able to make money, and we are talking about huge amounts of money, this is not going to stop, whether it's a trafficking of refugees or trafficking of migrant workers, or or smuggling of migrant workers who believe that when they come here they'll be able to make better money for themselves and their children back home.
So tell us now about how all of this started. Let's go back to the basics of what made you set up all of these events to make sure that these refugees mingled with the local community in Malaysia, and what came out of all of these great ventures.
I think we were quite successful with the Refugee Festival, because in the fourth year of the Refugee Festival, it became a political advocacy tool of its own. But when 2020 happened, it was horrific. The target against the Rohingya was horrific, and I'm not sure if you have met this guy called Zafar, who runs this organization called Mehrum, Mehrom. And he became the target because they said that, oh, you're asking for rights. How dare you talk about, rights for you in Malaysia? And it just snowballed, right? It snowballed to affect the rest of the refugee communities and then the migrant workers as well. So I felt like all the work that had gone into making this a success story kind of dissipated. So I had to think about what else we can do. During COVID, the hospitals desperately, medical workers in hospitals and vaccination centers needed food. And having worked with the refugee communities, I must say that there are brilliant chefs. They make incredibly yummy food. So what I did was I managed to convince organizations to give us money. So money went into the pockets of refugee chefs, and food went to hospitals. I started with the Ampang government hospital, because Ampang, as in 20 minutes away from the city center, KLCC, the Kuala Lumpur city center. So my sister works there as a senior consultant. She's a surgeon there. So she organized it, and I sent food for the first 1 week. And I posted it on my Facebook with a blurb about how refugees are really happy to be able to be given a chance to contribute to a society that has accepted them, accepted as in quote unquote. And that kind of really went viral. It went viral on Twitter, as it was then, and also on Facebook, and everyone was talking about it. And the story made it all the way up to The Guardian. So I used that as an opportunity to create a positive spin, trying to make Malaysians understand that if opportunities are given, then the refugees are able to contribute effectively to any given society. We just need to give them that opportunity and create a platform for them to do that. So that was a success story. I think that, things are kind of up and down from then, because, then you have a little bit of hate speech, and then, suddenly you have someone trolling the Rohingya or saying something about refugees. So the Refugee Festival became that much more important. And I realized that, my work, of course, advocacy and connecting with different refugee organizations in Southeast Asia, lobbying ASEAN, all that is important work. But what is the point? What's the point of lobbying for the right to work when the refugees have to work alongside Malaysians? And there is so much hostility. The Malaysian government has never done anything, even though it sporadically tells you that, hey, we are going to look at the right to work. And then I'm like, yeah, whatever. When it happens, I'll get excited about it, right? But, what are you doing about ironing out hostilities and sticking points on the ground? We can't do that. We are trying so hard. But without political will, the government can do it at a large scale. Where am I going to go for the money? I was just telling Luis about how it is so difficult, with the shuttering of US aid, for us to actually get small pockets of money to do proper intervention on the ground, right? And I'm talking about $50,000. I'm not talking about $500,000 here.
I was just thinking again about some of the students I had when I was in Malaysia, when I was teaching law, and how some of my students were illegal. They were illegal students they were illegal workers from Myanmar, and some of them didn't even have the usual protections that the United Nations gives to those who are officially recognized as refugees, as asylum seekers. And so I remember how these people would, of course, because they were illegal, they did not have access to any kinds of rights when they were abused by their employers. That was the inevitable consequence, which means they were paid lower wages, and if ever they were mistreated, or not paid at all, yes, or if they were mistreated at work and they were abused at work, they had absolutely no protections, and they were therefore at the mercy. Yes.
Okay, let's talk about a migrant worker. Say a migrant worker is raped or gang raped, right? The first thing you do is ask whether she has got documents. Because if she's undocumented, what happens is you go and complain to the police. The police will check whether she has got documents. If she's undocumented, the immigration law kicks in first. So the fact that she was raped is put in the back burner. The fact that she's undocumented becomes the main issue. So immigration will kick in, and before you know it, she's in immigration detention. Will she ever see the court? Will she ever be able to drag her perpetrator to court and seek justice? Never. So that's why I say that while we talk about Gaza on an international platform, it is equally important for us to look at our existing laws and see whether it actually aligns with international human rights law, international refugee law, international humanitarian law, so that we can take care of what's in our backyard first, while we continue speaking about Gaza.
What kind of support are you getting from the community at large for all these laudable projects you're involved in?
I must say that, when COVID happened and we needed to give food and groceries and medicine, and then the floods happened if the COVID wasn't enough. So Malaysians came out to support, whether it was donating their money, donating their time, donating groceries and other things. And I used to make calls for them to turn up at a particular place where we were actually packing groceries or repacking groceries. Like we used to buy big sacks of onions and garlic and whatever and repack it. And Malaysians will turn up, even if it's at 8 and work right up through midnight, right? So that kind of support is there. So yes, we have become largely racist and xenophobic, but we do also have a large segment of Malaysians who are equally sympathetic and empathetic about these issues and these causes, and they do come, right? So in total, we would have easily, from 2020 right up to today, given out more than 500,000 hot meals to refugees and all the other different communities during COVID, as well as the subsequent floods. And easily like more than 200,000 households when it comes to groceries. I'm talking about the fact that, when I say we, I'm talking about the fact that I am a small NGO, like a really small, tiny, minute organization. And I get all of these people who come and partner me, the public, Malaysians, other civil society organizations that come together as a way of saying, come, let's do this. Let's find the money. Let's do this. So if you go on my Facebook, and now that Ramadan has just started, I will go on my Facebook to ask for money for, like, say, 100 homes, for example. So a lot of the Facebook posts also talk about fundraising as well.
Yeah. We want to ask you about the festival. So, Mahi, what inspired you to transform the original Refugee Fest into Festival of Wheels?
Okay. From Refugee Festival to Festival on Wheels is because, the Refugee Festival happens in one place. And we will advertise, and we hope that different people will actually come, over the 3 days to watch and interact and mingle with the refugee artists and also listen to the panel discussions. But then I realized that, we were becoming more and more hostile. There was so much hate speech. I can't even figure out whether this is for real or this is trolls working their mighty powers. It really wasn't clear. So what I decided was, there were also a lot of Malaysians who wouldn't come. Like, for example, a Malaysian who sits in an Indian village, or a Chinese new village, or in a Malay kampong as in a village, right? Will not come because there is they won't be inspired, and sometimes it could be quite daunting for them as well. And people are also afraid of things that they do not know in its entirety. So I thought, okay, why don't I bring these refugees to your doorstep as a way of connecting you? And of course, in Malaysia, if you ever come, Luis, you'll understand that in Malaysia, whenever we do something, we make sure that there's great food. So Malaysia is known for its food. It's totally yummy food. So we make sure there's food. We make sure there's, tea and coffee, and we invite them to come. And once they are there, you can see the magic happening. Because when they start having conversations, they are like, oh my God, we don't know that this is what a refugee means, that they actually flee their homes. Because then they tell themselves, before I leave my house, I check whether I have locked my door like twice, even 3 times. And for those with OCD, they go back and they check it. But here, these people had to leave everything that they worked for, everyone that they love, that's precious to them, the memories, their life behind, and flee. And then they are like, what can we do? Mahi, can we give you money to support them? And I'm like, no, it will be great if you could talk to your elected representatives on the state and the federal level and ask them why they are not talking about the refugee rights, because they make up the larger part of the Malaysian society. And during COVID, we went around telling people and trying to make them understand that if we want to be safe, whoever it is in the society who make up the Malaysian society need to be safe as well. But again, if you go back to that time in 2020, the Malaysian government made an announcement asking, literally welcoming, or rather begging, refugees and undocumented migrant workers to come and get themselves vaccinated. They said that, hey, we need all of you to come because you need to be fine for us to be fine, and we need to be fine for you to be fine. Fair enough. And they also made, so a lot of CSOs actually went and spoke to different communities to say, hey, listen, this is a good opportunity, come get vaccinated. The government has already given its word that it will not go on a rampage and go on a hunt for you.
Right.
And the communities listened. But what happened was that the government went back on its words. So we also have that lack of trust between the refugee communities and the government as well.
Right. And to bring it back to the festival, because it sounds like such a unique case of fostering engagement and organization, how does the festival differ in concept and execution, as you were just saying, from the earlier Refugee Fest format that you had?
So, in terms of the execution and the format, it's almost similar. It's just that we have a smaller bunch of people traveling with us. Like, for example, the last one we did was in an Aborigine setting, in an Aborigine village, right? Now, in Malaysia, the Aborigines have little to no rights, despite being the people, they are the first Malaysians, for lack of another word, right? So it was incredible because, we have dancing, we have singing, we have panel discussions, we have conversations. And when these dance performances were going on, Malaysian dancers who were there just joined in. And Malaysians who had come to watch or be a part of the festival joined in and started dancing as well. So I think that in a smaller setting, that interaction becomes that much more possible, because that is what we want to see. The fact that, one person is embracing the other person's culture and understanding the fact that they bring with them unique culture, unique food, unique traditions. All we need to do is to be able to embrace it. I'm not saying that we need to lose our identity or they need to lose theirs, but the minute you connect them, you make them understand that there's nothing to be afraid of, that I can be me and I can embrace the other person who has come to make a new home in my country, and embrace them and welcome them and allow them in, and also get to know them, get to know their culture, get to know their dancing traditions and their songs and their language and those kinds of things. So I find it easier in terms of, because it's a smaller setting, it's a smaller number of people. We have a few hundred people who will come in and, like a few thousand over 3 days. But here it could be like 60, 70 people because it's a smaller setting. And I must say the interaction is that much more vibrant and engaging.
So I have 2 more questions for you. I think we have, actually, I would love to speak further with you, but I just realized we're running out of time. So my first question is, we've been able to understand your vision for these refugees in this conversation that we've had. What other objectives do you want to achieve in the coming years when it comes to the refugees, and what would make your dream come true if it comes to if it's about improving the plight of or working on rehabilitating these refugees in Malaysia?
I'm going to break it down. So when it comes to the Rohingya community, I would really like to see women leaders emerging from the community. Over the last year, we had a few regional meetings that were held in Kuala Lumpur, and we invited people from ASEAN parliamentarians and other regional organizations to come. And we invited all the refugee communities to come, and we specifically made sure that more women were invited, right? And I was actually in tears because Rohingya women stood up, walked up to the mic and started talking. They spoke about patriarchy, they spoke about toxic masculinity, they spoke about their dreams, they spoke about the fact that they are not stupid, that they have ideas and aspirations, and that need to be incorporated, into whatever policies that we are going to recommend, that their voices need to be continuously heard. I was actually tearing because for me it was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I would like to see more of that. I would like to see the Malaysian government keeping its word. Now we have Anwar Ibrahim, who is from Pakatan Harapan, and Pakatan Harapan's manifesto spoke about right to work and education and healthcare, about giving rights to the refugee communities. I would really like to have the Malaysian government start with the right to work at the very least, because it's really not about allowing them space in Malaysia. It's about allowing every refugee dignity. And we are not able to do that if they are always putting their hand out because they cannot take care of themselves, because they cannot put food on the table or make rent or send their kids to school. So I would like to see this happen in Malaysia, at least the right to work, in the next 1 to 2 years. I would like to see more voices, women's voices from the Rohingya community. And I would also like to do whatever I can, whether it's as the pen president or otherwise, as a way of creating more opportunities for different refugee communities to come together, to talk, to discuss, to have programs together, because that kind of unity also has to be fostered. Because now the refugee communities seem to be working in silo. Maybe not all of them, but I must say many of them. I would like to see them come together and understand their strength in unity, to be able to demand with one voice, because Malaysia does have obligations, as what I had already said. Now, regionally, conflict-related sexual violence is so close to my heart at this point in time. I spoke to mothers who have had their 5-year-old child sodomized and raped by a PDF soldier, the same soldier who should be protecting them, or a woman from the civil disobedience movement being raped at knife point, or a woman, who has asked this, I either do you or I do your baby. You make the choice, right? So it is really grotesque. And I know that I can't change the world. I know I can't change anything overnight, but I'm a mother, and I go and listen to these women. I'm a woman, I'm a feminist. And I go back and I need to tell myself that I just have to do something. I can't just go back and say, yes, this is work in progress. I cannot forgive myself.
Yeah.
If I don't try. So it is really to try, find the funding, get the CRSV project completed, get the questionnaire survey answered as a way of helping my team come up with the early warning system, lobbying the ethnic armed organizations and PDF to come up with a monitoring system, a check and balance, to come up with a system that allows women to report about their sexual violences without facing repercussions and backlash, and to push ASEAN, lobby ASEAN. I know it's going to be Philippines that doesn't care about refugees, and then there's going to be Singapore that doesn't have refugees, but then to lobby ASEAN to make CRSV amended. If I can work on this for the next 3 to 4 years and actually see it through, I'll come over and we'll party together.
We will. We definitely will. I have one last question, and you're a filmmaker, you're an artist. Is there one image that is stuck in your head, and that you probably would want to convey to us, that probably describes your emotions in a very deep way, your deep emotions rather, regarding what you've experienced of the Rohingya community and all these years of work you have accumulated with them?
Okay, this makes me emotional. But the thing is, I'm just an ordinary woman who is using all her platforms to try and give a voice, or try and create opportunities for the voices of the Rohingya to be heard. But more than that, I'm a woman who is so grateful, to have been accepted, to have been embraced by the community, who has been in their homes. I know I'm so grateful that they have shared their home, their food, their stories, and that they have welcomed me into their lives. And I must say that it's so wrong to say that I have taught them, that I have protected them, that I have helped them. They have helped me a lot. They have helped me understand courage, resilience. They've helped me to keep hoping for a better future. They have helped me reimagine that a better future is possible.
I want us to have the opportunity, because we have not had the chance to watch your documentaries, but we will, of course, mention them on the podcast when we are producing it. Is there any scene in it that you would like to convey to the public here, to our audience, to tell us a little bit more about the content of these documentaries that you've produced?
The documentaries are not pretty. They're very dark. And I can't remember exactly which one, but there is one scene where it is a rape scene in a border area. It was given to me by a trafficker's agent on a pen drive, and it actually shows a girl on a rock, and her skirt hoisted up to her waist. It shows a man actually raping her, and then it shows another man using a camera trying to get the best angle to show the penetration. And then out of the point of view, there is another person who is actually filming all of this, and all three of them bantering. Now, I pixelated it, but I did put it into the film, because at the end of it, the girl gets up, pushes down her skirt, and walks away. Absolutely no fight left in her. That is what we are talking about. The fact that these kind of grotesque sexual violence and other forms of violence and abuses have happened one too many times, and they have absolutely no one to turn to, no protection mechanism, and they have absolutely no fight in them, because it's just happening too often that, maybe it has even become so normalized.
This was Not to Forgive, but to Understand, with our guest, Mahi Ramakrishnan. To our listeners, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more discussions.